It's wintertime here. So what am I doing walking out in the middle of the day on a Monday? Well, I'm going to join some plein air painters. Plein air in the wintertime, especially with watercolor, doesn't the water freeze? Well, we're actually going into a greenhouse. Woo. Morning. Here is the greenhouse. I've never been in here before. This is nice. And it's really hot in here. But it's pretty. So I've spied some pottery in this greenhouse that I think looks interesting. So I'm going to do a sketch and see how that goes. And if I like the sketch, then I'll do it on the watercolor paper. What I have so far, I sort of like, but I think there's too much going on, so I'm going to simplify. So I think this is a stronger composition. It's going to be interesting because I'm going to have to rely on the darker values of one pot to help showcase the pots that are in front of them. And in the background here I'll have just sort of a suggestion of foliage. That's about it. I often don't like to do value studies, but this one served two purposes. Not only was it a value study, it allowed me to decide on composition. And when you're surrounded with everything in the world, all the things you could paint, you have to narrow down what you want in order to come up with the center of focus. The other thing is that when you do this, you get to practice it a couple of times before you transfer it to your paper and then do the painting. So really when you're finished with it, you've done it at least 3 times. So at least two practice sessions before you start to paint. Since I'm going to be painting black pots, I'm mixing up a combination of burnt sienna and indigo to get a nice black. Here are the pots. I'm going to be working wet onto dry, fairly dark. Normally we work light to dark in watercolor, so I'm going to start with some little bit lighter values and then come back with the darker. So what happened is that because I couldn't mix up enough paint, I'm going to get a hard edge in here because that's already dry. Because watercolor dries lighter, I'm hoping that this will dry light enough that I can go back and put in some darker values so it looks like I have highlights. And I'm trying to make that bleed on purpose. I'm going to put foliage in the background, so I really need to bring some of that color into these pots. And by putting the wet paint down on damp, I'll probably get a blossom, and that could be kind of interesting. If you've watched any of my videos, I talk about doing a flat wash, and you're not supposed to outline first or you get an uneven wash. I just broke that rule because I want to be able to paint in this parallelogram shape without much trouble. I'm going to drop in some darker value to make it a little more interesting. I'm trying to get all of the base color in before I go back and put in the darks, except if I see an opportunity to add some drama by doing wet into wet. It's surprising to me, as humid as it is in here, this painting is drying very quickly. This puddle could make quite a backwash, but you can see that there are some patterns forming. Now these are ceramics, they're very smooth, but whoever sees this painting isn't going to know it. So if I get texture, that'll look like pottery that has texture in it. So here's where I am, and now I'm going to start to add even more value to the pots to give a more sense of shadow and three-dimensionality. This is the painting as I completed it in the botanical gardens. I'm now back in the studio, and I want to add a few details to the leaves just to add a little more context. And I think I'm going to stop there. I just wanted to give the sense that there are some leaves, that there are some botanicals, that is not just floating blobs of green color in the air. And I think that that says what's going on. I mean, there were more leaves and vines this way, but if I have something in that direction, it could take the eye out of the painting, and that's not what I wanted. The other thing that I thought that I was going to do when I came back to the studio was to add in some highlights. I think the highlights are there. So I think I'm going to leave it. Now it's time for me to sign it and take the tape off. Ooh, I'll take the tape off now. Let's see how that looks. So here's the finished painting. I'm not really comfortable with plein air painting. And if you go try plein air painting and you feel uncomfortable, you feel like when I'm in the studio, I can control things much better. I have my photograph and everything is defined and confined. But plein air, you don't have that. Now there is something called a view catcher that I'll get that out and show that to you. That can help with that. But this is the challenge of plein air, and the great artists all say you've got to get outdoors and paint. And what's interesting in my past is that I actually did a lot of outdoor painting on the seashore. So I don't know why I moved away from it. Maybe I just wasn't in what I consider to be interesting places, and maybe I wanted that comfort, the security of being in a studio and having everything under control. So I'm getting a little more comfortable with it, and I'm actually reasonably pleased with this. To see more of my watercolor paintings, check out this playlist.